This is the How to Succeed podcast, and I'm your host, Mike Montague. My guest this week is Michele Delgado from Hartmetrics. Heart without the E, H-A-R-T, metrics.com. And we're talking about how to succeed at setting boundaries. I feel like this is a great topic for really every individual, but especially salespeople. We have to set a lot of boundaries with our clients and prospects in order to get done what we need to get done and set everybody up for success. So great topic today. It's brought to you by Sandler, the worldwide leader in sales management and customer service training with over 200 locations. You can find those at sandler.com. Here we go. All right, Michele, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about setting boundaries and how this became a passion topic for you.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me on the show, Mike. It's great to be here and talking about a subject that it's a journey for sure. So setting boundaries at a young age or starting out as a young salesperson, you know, if you are a hunter, you want to do everything to close that deal. You want to just whatever it takes, morning, noon, and night. You know, work-life balance doesn't really exist in the beginning, as you know. But
prospect calls, you have to pick up the phone. You got to, leave a meeting,
right.
Whatever, jump when they say jump
right.
and ask how high. Yeah.
When I was first starting out, and I did a lot more on the sales, on the account management and operations side, a lot of it was, what sales threw over the fence to us, but then it was, we had to deliver, and it was, you do whatever it takes. You answer every call, because it was always that fear in the back of your mind when you're young and starting that, oh my God, they're going to walk out the door, we're going to lose them, all of that. So I think that boundaries definitely starts as you boundaries starts to continue as you start to become more seasoned in it, for sure. First starting out, you might want to do whatever it takes, and that's going to reach burnout very quickly, for sure.
Well, let's start there with our attitude bucket, which is what are the common, and we kind of hit a couple of them already, the common myths and misconceptions about setting boundaries or really what's holding us back here? I imagine there's a lot of fears, right? Most of this is imagined in our own head, that if we say, no, I can't meet you till next week, that they're going to call our competitor and be gone, because sometimes that does happen. So how do we get our head right here when we think about setting boundaries? I
think that there's absolutely communication is key when you're first connecting with a customer. It's all about building that relationship. And, we're humans. We're not machines. We're not a robot that you're pushing a button expecting, immediate perfect returns. So building that relationship early on is really important to manage those expectations, and communication, letting them know, hey, listen, this is what we can do, having that, as I know in Sandler, having that upfront contract, if you will, making sure that you set the tone very early on. And again, we're human, so sometimes things kind of fall off the rails. So you have to have that, making sure you have that commitment to come back to what you agreed upon, to make sure that you are doing the best you can for yourself, for the company, and then of course for your client.
Yeah. And as we look forward, I guess, what's the ideal attitude here with boundaries? I am picturing this great saying that we have here at Sandler about a velvet covered brick that you want to be soft to the touch, but you want to be firm when pushed against with these boundaries. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that, for me, what used to creep in, and it still does from time to time, is that imposter syndrome, where you're just like not sure of what you're selling or what you're doing. And, oh my gosh, they don't like me, all those things. What am I doing here? I don't deserve to be here. So you really have to kind of park that imposter syndrome aside and show real confidence in what you're selling. And it's okay not to know everything, but you have to be able to have that commitment that you're going to find out for them. So.
Yeah, I think that is really the interesting part, that when we have kind of the conviction to do the right thing and that we can help people and we believe in ourselves and the company and the marketplace, we can relax a little bit and be like, we have something special that's of value. So they're going to want it, and they're going to want it even if I can't answer the question today or return their call this afternoon. Like, they're still going to have a problem that I can solve.
Yeah.
And I think that gives you a lot more confidence to kind of relax and take your time with it, right?
Exactly. And, sometimes we have to remember that the person on the other side may not know all the answers either. They're looking
Mhm.
for you as the subject expert because there's a pain point that you're trying to solve for them. So, you know, forget that they are maybe testing the waters, checking you out, and be confident in what you're bringing to the table to help solve their issue.
I think that's a great lesson there too. I have been teaching this for so long, and when you have enough of these examples where you set boundaries, and the prospect actually goes, "Oh my gosh, thank you! Like I didn't want to deal with this after 5. Please, yes, can we schedule this tomorrow?" Or, can we turn our cameras off today? I'm having a bad hair day or something, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh
Yeah.
yes, thank you. I can't tell you how much I hate being on camera." And they let their guard down because you let your guard down, or you set boundaries, and they respect you for it. So I think as many times as, and probably 5 to 10 times more than when somebody gets upset, they can still say it's important to them and they need an answer by 5, or they can say, yeah, no problem, I'm leaving on vacation too, I don't care either, get back
Yeah.
next week. And it usually happens more times in my favor than it does against me, I think.
Yeah.
Do you
I
agree?
don't, and I think that also, when COVID hit and so many people were working from home, dealing with, I can remember being on workshop calls and somebody would say, "Excuse me, but they're landscaping outside, so you hear the blowers or the dogs are barking or Amazon came to deliver." And that was a common one. That was like always funny because, oh wait, the Amazon truck's here and the dogs are barking. And so we kind of give a little bit more grace to people's lives, if you will, so that we can kind of put our guard down and be authentic with the other person for sure.
Now, as we transition to our behavior bucket here, this is all about doing the right thing at the right time, our goals, plans, and actions. And for me, I think this means upfront, the ahead of time. I think where a lot of people get in trouble is they try and set boundaries too late after somebody's already crossed them, or they
Yeah.
wait till they bump up against these boundaries to say something. And that doesn't work as well. Do you have any advice for us here?
Yeah, so I'll share a story with you when it really kind of hit home that boundaries was so important in a work life, in a work relationship. I was scheduled to do a training for an executive admin team, and my co-host, if you will, was the manager of the organization who was leading this. And I had just found out that my mom was diagnosed with cancer. And so I typically do not have my phone on, always the cardinal rule to have your phone ringing while you're doing any kind of presentation or a meeting with a client. And so I was pretty nervous about it because she was, no nonsense kind of person. But I went in and I said, listen, I have to have my phone on because X, Y, and Z. And she looked me dead in the eyes, and I thought, oh my God, this is it. I'm going to be asked to leave kind of thing. And she says, I have to have my phone on too because my mom was just diagnosed with cancer as well. So that was the bond that took us, our relationship was completely different and completely evolved from that. So being human with the person, I'm not saying you have to share all your laundry or your, intimate details of your life, but I think that having set the tone with somebody very early helps in building great boundaries with one another, because then it was, okay, I can't be there at 3, but I can be there at 6, maybe later on, or I can do that the next day, and start to really communicate those. Saying it later, would probably pissed her off. Or having the phone ring, those kind of
Having
things.
the phone ring definitely would. I think that's a great example and a powerful story. Like we said, you just be surprised so many times when you think, people are going to go one way and they go the complete opposite,
Yeah.
and become more human in these moments. And then the other thing that came to mind there is yes, like if you don't say anything and then people are wondering, of like, Michelle's really been missing a lot of meetings lately, or she's
Yeah.
always late to this and other things. And if you're not sharing why, they don't understand. So they make up their own stories. And
Yeah.
usually as human beings, we put that on us. She must not like me, or she's too good for, or too busy to spend time with me because she's not on time. And we make it about ourselves rather than saying, oh, Michelle's mom has cancer. We need to give her a little bit of grace and she'll be here when
Yes.
she,
Exactly.
I think those are, it just completely different stories, right? That's
Yeah.
180 degrees difference.
Yeah. I think that the key for me from then on, and even up until today, is when somebody doesn't seem to behave the way you think they might, because we all have our stories. Some of us
Mm.
make a whole movie out of it with actors and directors and all of that. But I think staying curious as to what might be going on in their world, because when you're meeting with somebody, a prospect or a client, and you're going over things and they are maybe looking a little disengaged or they're on their phone a lot, it may not have anything to do with you, but everything to do with what's going on in their world. Who knows? Maybe they're even looking for another job. You just don't even know. So
Yeah.
it's just staying curious to make it less about you and about the other person.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it takes us right to our technique section of our talk, because that curiosity to me ends up in neutral questions. So Sandler and what we teach is, I'm not asking like, I don't know, I'm not telling them certainly about boundaries or what they should do. And I'm not necessarily asking them for permission or to like rescue me in a situation either. I think a great way to have these conversations is to ask neutral questions. Like,
Yes.
would you mind if we do this meeting virtual instead of me traveling across the country because, I've got my kids that week or something?
Yes.
That lets them say, totally okay. Virtual is fine. Or they can say, you know what? I hate to tell you, but like everybody else is going to be here. Like, the bosses are coming in from the UK or something, and the rest of us are going to be in person. And then you go, okay, that's important to them. And I can decide then where I put my boundaries and stuff. So I think for me, the best technique is sort of neutral, open-ended questions where I'm not leading the witness one way or another. Lets them kind of pick what's comfortable, and then you can adjust to those. Do you have any other tips, tricks, or hacks for having these conversations?
I love that point where you're hearing what's most important, but sometimes it's having more than one option, even from the very beginning.
Mm.
So if a client says, "Oh, we really need to meet," etc., and it's in person, okay, well, we can do it. Maybe it's a different time, or maybe you have to bring in somebody else because if you've missed several different things in your family. But that's an internal choice. You have to see what's most important in that scenario. Maybe your boss needs to come into that situation because you really need to be here, and you could be remote. So giving more than one option for the customer to decide helps protect your own boundaries, and so that you're not feeling guilty or fear that you're going to lose the deal.
You mentioned bosses, and so I want to ask you a tough question here, because I do think so much comes from the leadership, right?
Yeah.
Of giving our employees, especially our salespeople, permission to do what's best for them and the clients, I think is something that is more challenging for leaders than it should be. I think we get too focused on time productivity and time management and efficiency than we do about what's actually effective and what is healthy for our clients and our salespeople long term. Do you have any tips for managers or leaders about creating a safe environment for people to set their own boundaries and make their own choices?
It's funny you say that because I was just having a talk about this and wrote about managing. And so we manage down, sideways, and up. And I was having this conversation with my former boss, and he says, well, if you guys didn't manage me up, I would really be in deep, what. So I think you have to have a real strong relationship with your team as a leader to either, let them do what's best, but also let them know that you're there, that if we need to restructure things, we have to reset things. That open conversation between you and your boss is so important. Having their support when you need it, and not being the helicopter boss as well. It's definitely a balancing act for sure. In my past, I have always been the person who has come to the table with the issue, but then also come with, here are my suggestions of solutions. And hopefully the boss is going to pick one of those three that is going to work out. And so always the least favorite is the third one, but the top one is, the one you really hope that they choose. But coming with solutions as opposed to, here's the problem, now help me, it's just not going to work.
Yeah, I second all of that. And you reminded me of The Infinite Game. Have you read that book or essay?
I've heard of it, but I have not read it fully. Yeah.
Yeah, James Carse wrote the original essay, and then Simon Sinek wrote a book about it.
Okay, the Simon Sinek
and
part.
It basically is shifting your focus from winning like this individual item or this individual sale versus a lifetime client or an employee satisfaction over the long term. And I think sometimes we get into this situation where it's like the straw that broke the camel's back, right? That at some point, it might not be about this individual meeting, but at some point you're going to catch your employee or your client on the wrong day, and it's going to be one too many things and you lose them. And so I think for both salespeople and leaders, if we keep our eye on that long-term satisfaction, then it kind of takes the pressure off of this one individual call or other situations, right? We can set boundaries that create a healthy lifelong relationship and worry less about whether this one particular meeting, was early or late, or this, proposal was delivered on the exact minute that it was requested.
Certainly in a new relationship, it's kind of the honeymoon stage, right? So they really are getting to know you, you're getting to know them. But as an existing client where you're now doing some upselling and things like that, it's so important to have open lines of communication and so important to build that relationship. That one downside is not going to determine the entire relationship. Hopefully they are, in tune with that you plus the company are doing the right thing for them, that it's a valued partnership and not just this one-off. So I think that it's really important to have that going frequently. You have to continue to build that relationship.
And then you and I have met before, so I know a little bit about your story, but I think a good final question here would be about your background and your specific, story around boundaries, because I've said it before on the podcast. I joke, like, I'm a middle-aged white guy from the middle of the country in the middle class. Like, I check no boxes whatsoever for any diversity items ever. But I think that there could be some places where people feel like they can't set boundaries because they already feel like they're an outcast. And if they give somebody else another reason to not like them, that could be the one extra reason. Can you talk about that a little bit and what advice you would give somebody that maybe isn't feeling confident enough to set boundaries?
The one thing that I do for myself, because I have had that for my own experience building up and elevating in my career, is that I always felt like I needed to do more than the next person because of being a Latina woman, because I was a woman, all the because ofs. But I had to learn that I had to celebrate every milestone. It was like a drop of dopamine to help me realize that I am deserving to be in this seat. I am deserving to keep moving forward and to be confident and to be in that room to represent the company, to be of service to that customer, et cetera. So that negative noise that goes on in our heads frequently is always going to be there. And when it comes in, you're here today. Oh, that's great. Not in the mood. Don't have time. Thank you very much for showing up. And just keep reminding myself of every win that I've had that day. And that really helps kind of stay in that positive mindset, because negative stories we tell ourselves can really put us in a slump. And we have to just recognize that they come, but that, hey, wait a minute, I've done a lot of good stuff. Let me focus on that and keep building on those. So that's how I kind of remind myself that boundaries are healthy for me and healthy for the person who I'm interacting with and exchanging ideas with.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. And I want to get to know you a little bit better before we let you go too.
Yeah.
At this point in your career, how do you define success for yourself?
When somebody says to me, thank you so much, you've inspired me to do whatever it is. So those 2 words, thank you, specifically for a conversation that I've had with them, is success for me. So I love giving back and having inspiring people.
Was there a biggest failure you're most proud of, or a particularly hard lesson learned that you had to get over in order to be successful?
Yeah. When I was let go from my job because travel was no longer, that was a huge failure. That kind of rocked me, and I'm sure it rocked many, many other people, millions of people. But it was definitely took months before I realized it was a gift, because now I'm doing something more important. I'm doing something that brings value to others. And so I looked at it as a failure, but it was really, as they say, failure is just a pivot to something more successful or meaningful. And so that to me was a turning point for sure in my career.
And do you have a favorite quote, motto, or mantra?
I do have a favorite quote. So it's a Shirley Chisholm quote, and I might be paraphrasing it a bit, but it's, if they don't have a chair for you at the table, bring your own folding chair. If you don't have a chair at the boardroom, bring your own folding chair. So something like that, but yeah.
I love it. That's a great one, and a good spot to start wrapping up here. We've been talking with Michele Delgado. You can find her at hartmetrics.com. It's Hart like Kevin Hart without the E. Metrics.com. And tell us a little bit about what you do and what you have going on there.
Yeah, so I work with individuals or small companies, and I help them change the negative story they tell themselves and that people-pleasing behavior so that they can achieve greater goals and objectives and have peace in their life. Because when we live in that negative story, like I said, some people write a whole movie. They're the director, the actor, the critics, the audience, and everything, and it really kind of keeps them motivated to stay stuck. So I help people unmotivate and get unstuck.
Great stuff. Thank you so much for joining us, Michele. Worldwide leader in sales management and customer service training. You can go to Sandler.com. We have over 200 locations. We also have an enterprise team. If you have 200 locations, you can talk to our enterprise team and we'll help you out there. Also, a ton of free resources. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. This is an important one. Maybe send it to somebody that you think needs to hear it. And until next time, whatever you are, be a good one. That's what I always say. Have a great week. Good selling, everybody.